Hi, everyone, and welcome to the fifth in the Nebo Company's webinar series, Smart Strategies for Talent Development. Our topic today is strategic coaching engagements, how to bring focus to coaching. I am your host for the day. My name's Izzy Martin. The Nebo Company is a leadership development firm located in Washington, D.C. and Atlanta. Nebo works at the intersection of leadership, strategy, leadership development, and culture. We provide coaching, team coaching, and leadership development, and we're known for our strategic vision and planning work, as well as culture change. Today, we're delighted to share insights from more than 15 years of experience coaching and developing leaders. Before we jump in, I wanted to give you a few tips on how to participate in the webinar today. The first tip is to participate in our poll. At one point, kind of towards the beginning of the webinar, you'll have the opportunity to click your answer in a poll. When the time comes, I'll let you know. You'll see the poll appear on your screen and you can send in your answer. The second way to participate is to type in your questions. So Kate will save time at the end for answering questions. And all you'll have to do is use the Q&A function that you should see in your Zoom window. You can type in your questions to us and we'll read them aloud. If you have a question at any time during the webinar, please feel free to write to us via the Q&A function or with the chat function in your Zoom window. I'll take note of your questions and we can address them at the end or in real time. The last thing is troubleshooting. If you need help at any time during the webinar, feel free to send me a chat or a direct email. My email address is imartins@nebocompany.com. And now, with no further ado, I would like to introduce our facilitator for the day, Kate Ebner. Kate Ebner is the founder and CEO of the Nebo Company. She has been a leadership coach since earning her coaching certificate at Georgetown University in 2003. While serving on the faculty of Georgetown Leadership's coaching program, Kate also helped found the Institute for Transformational Leadership in 2012, which is now in its 7th year. Kate is an actively practicing leadership coach who works with senior leaders, CEOs, and executive women, and she's passionate about making sure that leaders everywhere and at every career stage can access great coaching. With that, Kate, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Izzy. And thank you all for joining us today. This is, as Izzy mentioned, the 5th in our series, and I think a topic near and dear to my heart, which is how do we really get the most out of a coaching hour and a coaching series. So we're going to talk about this and provide some really practical as well as maybe anecdotal guidance for you. I'm going to turn my video off in just a second, but I did want to say hello and give you a chance to see us here at the Nebo Company. We'll turn this video back on when we get to the Q&A at the end. So as we move forward with the program, I want to just begin with a little bit of objective setting about what is this program about today. And our topic is very simple: how to bring focus to coaching. Good coaches know that coaching is a purposeful conversation. In fact, as you interview someone to be your coach, every coach will tell you that this is a conversation for action. It's a conversation that is different than therapy. It's different than advising or mentoring. Coaches are trained to bring a particular kind of conversation to you. Great coaches, however, really understand how to do this in such a way that you develop a sense of momentum, a sense of focus, action, and momentum through the course of the coaching engagement. So what we hope you'll take away today is a little bit more of an understanding of the art and science of setting and using coaching objectives. We're hoping you'll be able to see the balance between action and reflection. That's a natural part of every good coaching engagement. And I think that's an important point, because very often we're struggling to know, am I doing it right? Am I doing enough action? Am I doing too much reflection? Or am I moving too quickly and need to slow down? So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then I want to dig into sort of 3 strategies and some tactical tips on how to make your coaching work more strategic. This is designed with a variety of audiences in mind. So you might be here because you're working with a coach and you want to know if there's something you can learn and apply. It might be that you are a coach and are hoping to pick something up, or it could be that you're a sponsor of coaching in your organization and want to understand some best practices around how coaching work can work. Looking forward to sharing this with you. I think of a good coaching engagement the way that when we read a book, we move chapter to chapter, and each one of the coaching sessions is a chapter in the book. I suppose a more current way of saying that would be like a Netflix series where you watch different episodes. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to make these episodes link and connect, and how to really start out with a clear sense of focus and then move forward knowing that you're actually working on and building progress toward that focus. So we'll start off with this poll, and our question for you this morning is, what do you think makes for a productive coaching session? And Izzy has laid out the poll for you, and it's started, and we would invite you to take the poll. Izzy, is there any direction you want to give here?
Sure. So you should see that a poll has just popped up in your Zoom window. So take a moment and think about this question. What makes for a productive coaching session? And we've outlined some options for you. So option number 1, getting to an actionable outcome, at least one aha moment, revisiting progress, feeling heard. Maybe it's just having someone be a witness to my situation. Maybe it's having a thought partner and sounding board, turning conversation into meaningful assignments, linking conversation back to development objectives, helping shift perspective or see something new, or perhaps it's challenging me, playing devil's advocate. So we'll keep this poll open for about 30 more seconds. So take a look, cast your vote, and then we'll get to see what everyone thinks.
Yeah, while you're casting your vote, I'd love to say that I think this is a great list if you're working with a coach to think about what's possible that could happen in a productive coaching session, because I think any one of these could happen. And I think maybe it's a good checklist for, am I actually getting what I hope to get out of a coaching session? So these are, all of these things may not happen every time, but these are the kinds of things that do occur.
Absolutely. So I'll give you about 10 more seconds. It looks like most of you have already voted, but you have one more opportunity to do so if you haven't. And then we will close the poll and see what we've got. All right, so you should see the results of the poll on your screen. And looking through, it seems that there was a clear winner. Helping me shift my perspective or see something new got 51% of the votes. And having a thought partner and a sounding board came in second with 18% of the votes, followed by getting to an actionable outcome. Kate, what do you make of this poll?
I don't know, I'm kind of pleased with this poll. I'm happy to see these results. I think that helping me shift my perspective or see something new is an enormous benefit of coaching. And that, when you can see something different, you can do something different. You can move forward with a new set of possibilities. So to me, these are the conditions for a breakthrough in a coaching engagement, to be able to shift your perspective. So I'm pleased that so many people seem to understand that in the way that they've responded. I also am curious about when I look at what else is up here, I think there's some things that maybe we think of as baseline, like you should indeed feel heard in a coaching engagement. You should indeed have someone who's bearing witness to your situation as you describe it. So it makes sense to me that those are perhaps givens even. I would say that the thought partner sounding board piece is an interesting one for us coaches, because we very much know that we are not meant to be advisors and mentors. We actually need to sort of stay in our lane and use the coaching process, not a consulting process. And yet I think skilled coaches really are capable of thinking together with their clients and creating conversational frameworks that allow for brainstorming, for example, or ideating together, or being a bit of a devil's advocate might be related to this around a particular strategy a client has. So I think this is a great start in our conversation today. We're going to be focusing today on some of the things that didn't get chosen as much, like getting to action, and how do we connect what we're doing with what our organization has lined up for us as a developmental objective. So that's also kind of an interesting addition to the thinking, I guess. So as we move forward, and we'll remove the poll here, I want to put that away. I want to just say a word for a moment about the Stakeholder Triangle. And this is something we've talked about in other conversations. We have been previously talking about how to think about the relationship between your own work with a coach and the organization's expectations of the coaching. And when I think about this for you, what occurs to me is that sometimes people go into coaching wanting it to be a very protected bubble that really has very little to do with what the supervisor or the sponsor thinks should be the focus of coaching. And yet, what I've learned from personal experience is that what's best for my client is also what's best for the organization, and vice versa. So part of the starting up of a coaching engagement has to do with really coming to some agreement about what's the purpose of this coaching. And at Nebo, we really emphasize that we're not providing performance coaching. That would be the kind of coaching that's sort of like, you better fix this or else. That's not what we do. When we say leadership coaching, we really are referring to coaching someone's potential. So one of the questions I ask early on in a coaching arrangement, particularly as I'm talking to sponsors, is, are you investing in this person because you believe in them and want them to be here and part of this organization, or are you trying to fix something? And I make sure that we're not sort of a Band-Aid being put on a situation that perhaps has gotten too far along. If the sponsor says, you know what, we really want to invest in this person, and they have a couple things that we'd like them to focus on or pay attention to, that can actually be very helpful and valuable. So we will go forward with something like that. Sometimes the sponsor says, it doesn't matter to us what you work on. We want this person to have the support, the privacy, and the freedom to really use the coaching however they want to. And we trust that it will be a good process. So we see various levels of engagement from sponsors and supervisors when it comes to launching a coaching engagement. But I will say that it serves us all well when we realize that the leader who's receiving the coaching, having some alignment with the sponsor supervisor who's sponsoring it, benefits the process enormously. And I have a quote here from David White that some of you perhaps have heard me talk about before. I love this quote. Work is the place where self meets the world. And so if we understand that it's actually in the workplace, challenged by our objectives and what's on our plates, that we grow, then any supervisor or sponsor of coaching understands that the playing field for learning is actually the work itself. So we go to do the coaching work, and it's not like coaching is outside of the conversation about success and effectiveness at work. It really is that the workplace is providing the context for the coaching. And so again, a good coach understands how to connect the dots so that the objective and the priority and really the motivating theme that the leader is choosing really serves not only that person, but also the organization and the objectives and goals that the organization has for the leader. I talk about this, and as I'm listening to myself, it seems so obvious, but I will tell you that this is a muddy area in a lot of coach engagements where people aren't entirely sure how to participate, what they can know about, and of course there's a concern for confidentiality. Excuse me. And so confidentiality in terms of what happens in those one-on-one conversations must be upheld and is of vital importance. But we believe in really starting out the gate with some alignment about what is our objective. And we're glad to take questions about that as we go. So begin with the end in mind. When I begin coaching someone, I often like to ask them, you know, when we're done at the end of 6 months or 9 months or 12 months or however long it is, what would you like to have be different? kind of an awkward statement, but I think that what I'm really looking for is the before coaching and the after coaching. Can my client articulate what they would like to have be different as a result of their work with me? And sometimes they can, sometimes they can't. But this question really gets us in the idea that we're actually going somewhere with the coaching. It is a productive and purposeful conversation. We do want to start out the gate with some sense of the destination. And I would also say that sometimes clients will have a very, very clear picture of what they want to have be different. Sometimes the question itself is the beginning of a longer conversation as we really find our way of framing the coaching engagement. I would encourage you, if you're thinking about working with a coach, to go into it thinking about what is it really that I want to change or evolve or grow into? How do I want to be different at the end of this? That's the beginning, I think, of the motivated commitment that you need to get the most out of it. Coaching does have a beginning, a middle, and an end. The process has a startup phase, and then it has the sort of big middle period where we're doing the regular rhythm of coaching conversations, and then it comes to an end. And I think good coaches believe in fulfilling a contract to its end. And I think as a coach, we often are we're trained, and we know our definition of success is not that we coach the same person for years and years and years, but rather that we complete a contract with the real progress and momentum, and that the leader we're working with has a sense of how they will sustain their growth after the coaching, so that they're sort of able to sort of fly away from the work with a lot of momentum. So when we think about the start of coaching, back to the beginning, it's really important to realize that the coach is going to ask you, what would you like this coaching to focus on? And often we find that the person entering the coaching process has a vague idea, but may not be familiar with the process, doesn't know exactly how to frame an objective for coaching. Good news is the coach brings knowledge and mastery of the coaching process, understands how to make it a purposeful conversation, and understands how to make it a safe and different sacred space conversation rather than just another business conversation or regular kind of conversation. So the coach brings all of the know-how needed to launch the process. The client is bringing a commitment to learning and experimenting. So the person who's successfully entering a coaching engagement is ready to learn and grow. They're willing to be honest, vulnerable, and open about their challenges. And this is really key, right? You have to come into it ready to share, ready to give the whole picture, ready to talk about the hard things, not just the good things. It's a process that requires trust. So I started to say that leaders rarely come into coaching with a clear statement about what they want to gain or accomplish. So if that's you, it's okay. You're not alone in entering coaching, wondering how to describe or frame what you want to do. Often people will say, I'm not sure what it is or what I even should expect from coaching. It is the coach's job to guide you through the process of establishing an objective. And setting an objective is vital to purposeful engagement. So we think about a coaching objective. This is something those of us who go to coaching school learn about, this thing called the coaching objective. And it is a feature of the start of every coaching engagement. It's when we say, what is it that we are focused on here? At Nebo, we choose the language of objective rather than goal because we think it's a bigger idea. It can include actually a couple of goals. It can include several goals, but it's a larger, more expansive framing. Once that objective is set, the coach and client can get started. So a good coaching objective provides a focus for the work. It supports the leader, the coachee's goals, challenges, and responsibilities. It aligns with the focus areas that might have come to them through feedback. So it's actually possible to link that objective with the results of a 360 or a performance review or even just a conversation that the leader may have had with somebody that got them thinking about how they might improve or change. A good coaching objective is understood and supported by the sponsor, the person who's investing in the coaching and in the leader. It's motivating and meaningful. So I often say to my clients, like, we've got this objective laid out. How motivating is this for you? And they might say, I'm totally motivated by this. They might also say, it sounds good, but I'm not really that committed, right? So then we'll go back to the drawing board till we come up with one that's really motivating. It could be too broad or expansive in general, but it needs to be big enough to allow for a motivating learning process underneath it. And I like to sort of encapsulate it with this kind of a framing. My coaching objective is X, right? And when we can articulate it, we understand it, we're ready to go. Where do coaching objectives go wrong? If they are too broad or if they're too narrow. If they say what the person feels like he or she should do rather than what they really want to do. Sometimes people come with a laundry list of objectives, too many. Some are not connected to work priorities or developmental feedback, and they seem to exist almost outside of the workplace, and yet the workplace is investing in this coaching. So we need to make sure we've got that connection established. Sometimes they go wrong when they're not connected to personal priorities. And by that, I mean that there's something big happening in your life, but somehow it's not in our conversation, and yet it's affecting how you're working. Not supported by key stakeholders. So you might care about something that your supervisor doesn't. And we might make huge progress, but you actually don't get the support and recognition for that progress that you might like. So that's a good checkpoint too. And then focused on changing behavior and the attitudes of others, not self. I think of a client I once had in our first coaching objective. He said the last statement in the quote list on the right there. He said, "I'd like to work on helping my boss take a stronger stand with staff." So in a way, what he wanted was coaching to help him coach someone else versus actually working on his own behavior. So when I think about a good coaching objective, being a better leader, we don't really know what that means, right? Too broad, right? I want to be seen as a leader, right? By whom, in what way? What do you mean by that, right? I want to master PowerPoint is way too narrow, right? That would be better for a training class. My supervisor tells me I need to work on delegation. The problem there is how motivated are you actually to work on delegation? It feels like a should do, maybe not something you're really excited about. Here's one. My objectives are to strengthen my leadership presence, gain recognition as a subject matter expert in my field, and be a better mentor to others. That's one of those laundry lists, right? So I look at that and I think, is there a way we can step back and find a more unifying, simpler statement that we could actually tackle some of these things or all of these things, but not as a laundry list, right? Too overwhelming. So a coach will ask these kinds of questions. What would you like to focus on? You might ask, what would you like to learn through this experience with me? You might ask, what are your priorities over the next 6 to 12 months at work, at home, for you, for your team? Just tell me what really is, what you feel accountable and responsible for, and also what you really want, what you really see as the most vital things to focus on in this time period. Sometimes my leadership clients will say, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to talk about my life outside of work. And what we know through our work as leadership coaches is that what's happening outside of work affects what's happening at work. Much better to bring a more holistic approach there. Coach might also ask, do you have any recent feedback that might help us shape this objective? And that is a cue to bring any feedback you've been getting from various informal and formal feedback loops. Some good objectives, here's some examples. An objective to develop my presence and voice as a senior leader with peers and executives. I see what you want to do. It's your presence, what's it like to be with you, and your voice. What do you say? How are you heard? How credible are you? As a senior leader is a good contextual piece with peers and executives. We now know what we're working on. Next one is to become more effective at developing and leading a strong, high-performing team. We can dig into that. There's lots of places to go with that one. That's a good one. To gain confidence, experience, and skill as a public speaker might be a good one. Here's one I hear a lot, especially from senior leaders: to re-energize myself and bring fresh vision to the organization. People will say, I've been here for 9 years. I need a new take on myself, never mind my division or my organization, right? So I want to bring new energy and new perspective. Somebody might say to manage myself more effectively so I'm more balanced and less reactive, especially when I'm frustrated, create a vision, or to achieve the major changes. So these are just good examples, I think. And I would say that, as you look at them, you might recognize some things you care about in this list, or there may be other things. Again, it's the coach's job to help you really articulate something that you're excited to work on. And if somebody, a friend of yours, asked you, what are you working on with your coach? You'd be able to say, I'm really working on a vision for the next stage of my career, or I'm really working on developing a strong, high-performing team, or I'm really re-energizing myself and re-envisioning myself for the next chapter of leadership. So it ought to be something that you can say easily and refer to without looking at your notes. I'm going to keep going rather quickly, and then we'll have a chance for questions and answers at the end. But I want to talk now about the middle of coaching. So one of the things I've noticed as a coach is that we get started, it's exciting. First few sessions, we're getting to know each other, really making some progress. Somewhere in the middle of coaching, things can kind of plateau. It becomes a rhythm, a conversation, right? So the coach's job here is to circle back to that coaching objective and ask themselves as a coach and also the leader, how are we doing? Are we making progress? Do we have momentum? Talking about the plateaus in your coaching engagement is really important, especially if you're the client, because it's far better for you to come to the session and say, I feel like I'm losing steam, or I just haven't really been doing the things I've agreed to do with you in this process. Can we just talk about why I'm stuck, right? So it's inevitable and natural that there are sort of peaks and valleys in the course of a relationship that typically lasts 6 months or longer. The critical piece is for the coach and the client to be talking about it, and for the coach to be able to use that coaching objective as a point of focus. A good question that I like to ask my clients at the end of every session is, what did you take from today's session? And I learned early on that it's almost never anything that I said. It's usually something they heard themselves say to me. So when I ask this question, I'm really asking for feedback on what was meaningful to you in today's session, what was particularly valuable. It's a way of tracking with you, and it's also a way of understanding that something did happen in the session. It may or may not be the thing I thought happened in the session, right? As the coaching client, you really are the one who gets to say how valuable a coaching session was. This feedback question is a great way that coaches maintain momentum in the engagement. They learn their clients, what they find valuable, what they don't, and also a way of understanding how conversation will translate into new perspective and new action, going back to the poll results a minute ago. Once that coaching objective is established, the coach can enrich that objective throughout the engagement, perhaps with articles, books, TED Talks, video clips, might design exercises to practice skills and behaviors related to it, self-observations related to that. Certainly we'll check in on that objective throughout the engagement. So the engagement serves as kind of a spine or a backbone for the rest of the engagement. The objective serves as a backbone for the engagement. I'm going to pause there actually and see if anybody has any comments or questions, and invite you to chat or use the Q&A feature, and Izzy will help us take your questions.
Sure. And Kate, I had a question come through. Should the coach take an active role in writing a coaching objective?
You know, it's a great question. I like the question because I would say whatever it takes to get a good one is what should happen. So I don't think the coach should sit with pen in hand, poised and ready to craft a coaching objective for the client. That's taking too much responsibility for it. But I think it's an iterative process. And sometimes the coach has better language than the client does because they do it all the time. So with my clients, I say, why don't you write to me or tell me what you're thinking? You talk, I'll write, and then I'll share with you what I wrote, and let's see if we can find some language. So it can be we can do it together. And I would also say sometimes my client will send me something that I understand completely what they're saying, but it's a little bit unwieldy, and I might suggest some streamlined language. So I think it can be a collaboration and should be a collaboration. I think if the coach listens to you like a doctor and then diagnostically sort of says, clearly you want to work on X, you know, your coaching objective will be Y, right? Then I would be concerned because in a way they're defining it for you. It really needs to feel like it's yours, regardless of who does the actual writing.
Yeah, great. And we had one more come in. What are things you look for in order to help identify if someone is ready or may not yet be ready for a productive coaching engagement?
Yeah, that's a great question. I like to talk early on about sort of what it means to me to work with someone in a coaching engagement. So I know that I'm going to be very committed. I'm going to give it my all. I'm hoping and expecting that they will too. So I might test to find out whether they're ready by making sure that they have the time and space in their lives for the coaching work. I might dig into a little bit to sort of what's their motivation behind the coaching. Is it because someone told them they had to do it? Is it because they've always wanted to do it? You know, what's really behind their motivation? And then I think that question about before and after, right? What would you like to have be different? That's really an invitation for somebody to sort of make the coaching process their own and really get out of it what they want. And so if somebody's sort of indifferent around that question, it might be a clue that they're not ready for coaching. But I would say that the biggest thing I want to make sure of is that they understand the commitment, that they are bringing enthusiasm to the process, and that they're understanding that even if they've been required to work with a coach, that this is something really great for them, and that the confidential and supportive nature of coaching can just be a tremendous advantage no matter what your circumstance is. Often I find when people are somewhat concerned or worried about why they're having a coach, that the conversation about what the coaching process is and the framing of the coaching objective can really eradicate their anxieties.
That's great. And let's just do maybe one or two more here. Do sponsors review or become aware of objectives once it's set by the coach and coachee? And then we had kind of a different but similar question. How does that change if there is no sponsor in the engagement?
Yeah, great questions. This is evolving, I would say, in the field of coaching. I'm really seeing that this can really vary organization to organization. I think that most sponsors could take a more supportive and engaged role than they do. And I think the critical piece, though, is understanding sort of how to participate in a way that feels supportive. And I would say that probably even at Nebo, where we really encourage what we call an alignment conversation with the sponsor, it doesn't always happen because it may not be preferred by the organization. I would say that if there is no sponsor, and that also happens a fair amount, then I would just say it's the coach's job is to make sure that there's a meaningful objective, one that benefits the organization as well as the individual, and that we're doing a good job of using the playing field that is the workplace to be a developmental landscape for the leader. So I feel like it's okay and no problem at all if there isn't a sponsor. Sometimes there's a lot of politics or sort of a feeling of high stakes with a sponsor. I think of CEO clients I work with who have boards, for example, and they're worried about what is the board trying to do or how involved should the board be. And that's where I feel like, again, a skilled coach can really bridge that conversation and help the leader and the board chair find a really positive starting place where there's a transparency, but not a over-involvement or direction of the engagement. So there's a little bit of an art to this, but I think it's the direction things are going. And I think those of us who are coaches need to get better and better at creating those sort of bridging conversations. Okay, I'm going to keep going for the moment. We'll have more questions at the end. What are some 3 strategies that help you bring focus to the coaching that you're doing? The first one is we've already stated it, but it's connect with your priorities. And I think on any given day, we could sit down and ask ourselves, what really are my priorities? You know, this quarter, this 6 months, this year, this week, right? How does the coaching I'm doing support my priorities? When coaching is aligned with priorities, what ends up happening is momentum. So I want to make sure we're not coaching about issues that are sideline issues. The second one is take a whole life approach. And I've already talked a little bit about how it's okay and even really pretty important to bring the whole picture into the coaching process. And then own responsibility for results. In other words, it's up to you, the coachee, to own the fact that this process can really help you have some really game-changing results if you allow yourself to participate that way. So I'll say a little bit more about each of these. How do you do it? Connect with priorities means sharing your goals, your worries, your priorities with your coach. It also means seeking and using available feedback. And your coach is your coach, right? So no matter how gritty and hard the feedback is, they're on your team. And so don't be afraid to share the good, the bad, and the ugly, because that's really what you need, is somebody you can trust to help you navigate through that. Do define your success as a leader in terms of the priorities and objectives you have in the workplace. So if your job, for example, is to deliver a particular sales number or run a successful merger and acquisition process or something, put that on the table. You won't be getting consulting around that from your coach, but your coach will understand that that's a definition of success in your world, and you will be able to actually use that situation to work on the leadership development pieces that you need in order to achieve that. Take a whole life approach, give that whole full picture, share your personal priorities and goals. Sometimes I'm startled to realize that my client has a very ill spouse, or that they're about to adopt a child, or, so make sure that whatever's happening that could affect your whole life is available to the coach. And do talk about when things change. The coach needs to know when something in your life changes. Own responsibility for results. These are sort of at the tip level, but schedule coaching into your calendar at the start of the engagement, right? So if you've got 12 coaching sessions in your contract, see if you can map them into your calendar in a realistic way, and then treat them as sacred. Don't cancel. Make time to do the homework that comes out of coaching. And I think whether it's reading or practicing something or writing in a journal or exercising, whatever it is, make time to actually do that thing. If you find yourself coming to coaching saying, oh, I didn't do it again, that would be a great conversation to have with the coach about why. Prepare to bring an update. I like to say to my clients, like, tell me what I need to know. What's new since last time? And then we'll choose a focus for this time. So just a few minutes, a brief update, but I want to make sure we're pulling the through line from session to session. Be honest when you're feeling stuck or derailed. Don't fake it for your coach. Don't feel you have to sort of please your coach. Your coach is in it with you. And I think a good coach will also call you out and say, seems like we're a little flat. What do you think, right? So again, the investment level is on both sides. Here's some tactical tips. I won't necessarily go through them all right now, but I think a couple things I want to point to is think about your spacing of sessions. People think that coaching needs to happen every 2 weeks. The more senior the person is, the less realistic that might be. 3 weeks might be better, even monthly. But what you've got to pay attention to as a coach is, do we have enough conversation that we have momentum and we have a sense of continuousness, or do we feel disjointed, right? And I often find 2 to 3 weeks is good. 4 weeks is stretching it. Notice what works best for you. Try not to cancel. Put that coaching objective, once you create it, where you can see it every day. Think about it, write about it. Don't abandon it. It's your focal point. We've talked about some of these other ones. This one I like, number 6. Talk to your coach about how you would like the process to be. If you want someone to be a devil's advocate, ask for that. If you want more brainstorming and creativity in your sessions, ask for that. I have a wonderful client who just finished working with me, and she said, I'd like to work with you in another chapter of work, but now I want to turn my attention in a different direction, and I'd really like to be working on some of the deeper, more spiritual aspects of leading. And that's kind of a change from what we've been working on. So again, you have the right to describe what you're looking for. Don't just sort of go along. The rest, again, I think are fairly straightforward here. I would say the number 9 is kind of a good one. Be succinct in the update part of your coaching hour. If you're kind of long-winded and you come in and you spend 25 minutes updating from the last session, you've only got 35 more minutes for the rest of your hour. Coach doesn't need you to use all 60 minutes for something new, but I would say if you can do a little bit of pre-work around what do you want to share, and your coach can also help you say, okay, I really get the new situation. We've got 35 minutes left. How shall we focus that, right? So again, the coach's job is to make sure you're having a productive hour, but I think maybe where you can help is just really thinking about, are you talking about what you want to talk about, or did you get sidetracked with something? Reflection versus action. This is something that's really interesting. I think sometimes when people enter the coaching process, they find themselves being asked to reflect, to be self-aware, to notice themselves in a meeting, or notice the way that their energy is flowing in the course of a day, or notice what's triggering them in their work environment, right? Notice. Coaching is all about increasing self-awareness, opening your eyes to what's happening around you and within you, and your commitment to becoming a keen observer of your inner life and the impact you're having around you is a prerequisite to transformative and transformational outcomes with your coach and in your life, right? So there's no shortcuts when it comes to reflection. That's probably of the two things, reflection versus action. It's the purposeful reflection that enables you to design new actions and new behaviors that are going to give you different results. So it's really a hand in glove, reflection and action. And finding the balance is something you can talk about with your coach. You can say, I feel like I've been really reflective and now I'm ready to do something. Or you can say, I've been practicing a lot of things. I need to sort of step back, right? So that's a natural conversation as part of the coaching conversation. I would just encourage you to do both, to know that you're going to do both. I think I hear two large themes when I start with clients. There's the clients who say, Kate, I'm very self-aware, and I have to tell you that 95% of people tell me that in the first session. I think of self-awareness as a galaxy, not a not a planet, right? So it's not like you are self-aware and so you're done now, you know how to do it. Think of it more like self-awareness is this vast journey of learning about yourself as a human being in the world, in the workplace, right? As much as you know, there's so much more. So this is a huge opening, this invitation to be reflective and to do it in a supported way. I also hear people who say, I hate self-reflection. That's totally not who I am. And I think there we might say, okay, then let's find a way for you to tune in and start to notice some things without having that be overwhelming or too, woo-woo for you. So I think, again, this is a good conversation with you and your coach. The important thing is to know that coaching is about both of these things. Finally, the coaching objective at the end. What do we do now that we're at the end of coaching? Well, we go back to that original objective and we ask ourselves, how did we do? And I like to use the coaching objective as a way of exploring the sense of momentum or progress that someone made. I often will summarize the progress I think that we've made and ask, what do you think? These are the kinds of things a coach can say to help drive that focus. Let's consider the coaching objective. How do you think you did with it? We began with ideas about what you hoped would be different. Should we take stock of what has changed? Has anything changed? Considering where you are now, what seems most important as you look ahead, right? So let's put a stake in the ground for your new position and let's aim forward towards your next chapter. And I might ask the person to share their own observations, and I might share mine. I often think people have a hard time seeing their own progress. And so I really love to be an observer of their progress and to encourage them. And I think great coaches really know what's been accomplished. So I want to turn back to the Q&A part of our conversation today. I know we've got just a minute or two left here, but I would love to take more questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a few questions that have come in. And here's a good one, Kate. How do you know that the client is ready to move into action? And I would say, and or is at the end of the coaching experience?
How do we know that they're ready to move to action? And how do we know that they're at the end?
Mm-hmm.
I would say, how do we know that they're ready to move into action is a good question to just ask, right? So when I think about the way that coaches work with clients, the design of the action is a collaboration, right? So again, it's not like the coach is going to say, here's your homework, go do it, like it or not. It's going to be more like, what if what would you think about trying this? And observing yourself while you do it, and we can talk about it next time, right? So the client could say, actually, no, I don't think I really want to do that, or I don't feel ready for that. Most people are eager to try something, and I think they appreciate the accountability of coming back to what they tried and talking about what they learned. I notice a lot of my clients will start off our coaching session saying, here's what I tried, and then I tried something else, and here's what I learned, you know. So I think there's an eagerness in the conversation to move forward. And I think if someone's not doing the thing they agreed to do, that's also an indicator that either they weren't ready, or for some reason they're stuck, or maybe not even focused enough on the coaching. So I like to keep track. I know a lot of coaches will keep track of commitments and say, how did it go? If the person didn't do it, we might say, what stopped you from doing it? I mean, often in coaching, the thing that's stopping you from taking action is the thing we need to be talking about, right? So the fact that you didn't do it is less important than that we get to the heart of what's holding you back. So it's a great conversation about, how you're doing and what you actually need.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any particularly powerful homework assignments that tend to create insight and breakthroughs?
That's a good one. We probably could create a book of these, like assignments that can create breakthroughs. It depends on the person and how eager they are to learn from their own process. So if somebody's really ready, the self-observation in a particular context, right? So I'm noticing that when I go to the meeting of these very, very senior people, I can't figure out how to participate, and I never really say anything, right? That might be the scenario, right? How do you break through that, right? So we might just start with a self-observation. What happens to you? What are your thoughts? What are your feelings? What are your fears, right? So just notice, a week or two of noticing what happens in that meeting. And then we might say, let's, use the research, right? If you don't speak within the first 17 minutes, the chances are that you won't, right? So let's give you a 10-minute window to say something, anything, right? Try it, come back and tell us what happened, right? Okay, you did it. And then what happened? Well, I said nothing the rest of the meeting. Okay, starting point, right? So I think inevitably the design of the exercise or the design of what's being attempted has to fit with the person. And that's what creates the breakthrough, is that it's the right size and the right design for what that unique need is. I would say, again, you hear me describing that balance of, here's what I want, I'll self-observe to see what happens, and then we'll design something for me to try, then we'll learn from that, then we'll talk about it, then we'll learn from the next step, right? So you hear that iterative, that's why coaching doesn't happen in one session, right? We're practicing and we're choosing the things that really work for you. And when we do that repeatedly over time, we can actually create whole new circumstances. I'll give you one other example. I have a number of clients who are working on managing their volatility, right? They lose their tempers in meetings. So what causes that, right? And we've learned that what causes it is that when that other person says that one phrase that I really hate to hear, my blood pressure goes up and I'm gone, right? So, okay, now we know that. So now let's do something else when that happens, right? So I think it's really this idea of awareness into self-management allowing new things to happen in terms of how you participate. New participation, new conversation leads to new transformative outcomes. Right. So again, it's this really wonderful dance between awareness and action.
That's great. And I want to follow up on a point we touched on a bit earlier in a previous question that someone just repeated. Does coaching come to an end? And if so, how do you know?
Yeah, it should, right? And what again, from a coaching perspective, and this is maybe a distinction between coaching and therapy, I think in my experience and others' experience of therapy, often we kind of go for a really long time until somehow we determine that either we can't afford it anymore or we've healed what we needed to heal, right? In coaching, the contract is established up front. We say there'll be 12 sessions, 8 sessions, there'll be this and there'll be that. It's very important that the coach bring a sense of closure and that the client understand that they've got a defined contract in which to work on that before to after shift. A good coach really brings it around to the end. Many clients I work with will say, okay, I'm going to go for a while without you. I may come back for something else, right? So it's not that you can't continue with your coach, but I think a coach who says, oh, I think we need 6 more sessions, or let's just keep adding, is probably not working closely enough with you to make sure you're actually driving to some resolution around the things you're working on. I would be a little bit cautious about that.
Great. Well, we are just a little bit past our time, so I think that we should wrap it up for today. But if anyone else has any more questions for us, please feel free to send me an email and we'll try to get you a response. You'll notice that we have 2 more webinars coming up for you this year in our Smart Strategies for Talent Development series. And we are on the coaching theme for the rest of the year. So we have the magic and methods for choosing the right coach on October 29th. And we'll be talking about coaching across cultures on December 10th. And you can sign up, register for both those webinars on our website right now. And tomorrow around 1 p.m., you will get an email with the recording of this webinar, as well as access to the slide deck. So that's all that we've got for you today.
Great. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you found something helpful for you here.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.